Climbing Gold is brought to you by The North Face, Never Stop Exploring. Koros, Performance Sports Technology. Element, Restoring Health Through Hydration. Henson Shaving, Buy Once, Use for Life. And Altitude Climbing, Level Up Your Climbing.
Hey everyone, just a heads up that this is going to be our final episode for the remainder of 2024. We're going to regroup and we'll be back in the new year with another year of stories, which I'm kind of psyched for a break. I will not lie.
Yeah, I'll be going to Yosemite for a little bit, do a little rock climbing, focus on the fam for a bit, and see what kind of stories inspire us for the next round of Climbing Gold.
Yeah, I feel like we've had an incredible year. Like when looking back at everything from all the incredible guests to the Olympics coverage, but I feel like we might have saved the best for last. Alex, who is our guest today?
Our guest today is Ben Mayforth, who is a climber, and since 2018, he's been competing on the global stage in paraclimbing competitions. I feel like most people listening have probably only seen him maybe on YouTube or on social clips, basically, because there are a bunch of videos floating around of him doing very hard things on the board, like him campusing V12 on the Kilter board.
It is insane.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah, today he's living his dream. He's a professional climber. He's traveling the world for competitions and World Cups. He's coaching when he isn't working on growing the adaptive climbing scene and leading trips. And he's basically an all-around go-getter who's just going big.
For so many of us, climbing provides a growth path. But for Ben, there feels like there's something about his journey where climbing seems almost necessary.
Well, it just seems like, especially in talking to Ben, it just seems like he really found his calling. He found a healthy outlet for so many different aspects of his life. And he was like, this is his path. And he's really taken to it as well as he can. I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitz Call.
This is Climbing Gold.
My name is Ben Mayforth. I am a paraclimber competing for the U.S. national team and avid outdoor climber.
How long have you been climbing?
I've been climbing for about 8 years now. Started in Columbia, Missouri after a very long wheelchair basketball career. Not the most ideal place to start climbing is Missouri. Went through my whole entire college career playing wheelchair basketball. But once I finished up my 4 years of eligibility, I decided that I needed to take that discipline and training and put it into a different sport. So a buddy of mine decided that we were going to go bouldering one day. It's like this hole-in-the-wall gym in like a little shopping center. To the right, it was a contracting business, and to the left was a liquor store, just filled with chalk, dust, and all sorts of just grimy, like old school bouldering gym style. The pads weren't the most clean. There were actually massive gaps in the pads, but I pulled on the wall for the first time and I was like, oh, I don't think I was supposed to be playing wheelchair basketball my whole life. I think I was supposed to be climbing my whole life. And it's been bouldering and climbing ever since.
Had you had any exposure with climbing before that? Like, how did you just get so psyched on climbing?
My uncle and dad were climbers in Alaska. So my uncle and dad in the 80s got jobs up in Alaska doing the forest fire service. And so I would go up to Alaska in Homer and visiting my uncle on occasions. And he was an avid ice climber and avid trad climber out in Alaska. And he would tell me all these stories about him and my dad doing things that probably weren't safe even for the time. And I was just like, oh, that sounds so cool, but I don't know how I would actually do it. And then I kind of like got into looking into bouldering through like YouTube videos, Daniel Woods, Jimmy Webb, Carlo Traversi, and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, bouldering seems a little more my style. I'm not taking long walks because with my disability, taking long walks and being out in the mountains for a long time was a logistical problem that I was trying to figure out. So I was like, I could do bouldering. I could find boulders that are relatively close, throw down a couple of pads, and be okay with that. So I got into bouldering that way.
And what is your disability and how does that affect climbing?
The overall diagnosis is Vader syndrome, which means there's something wrong with every major system of my body. So there's something wrong with my skeletal system, my urinary tract system, my digestive system, my neurological system. Like every single major system in my body is affected. I have a rib deformity where I'm missing 4 ribs on my right side. I just was never born with 4 ribs on my right side. So my liver actually slid up and my lat attaches to a really tiny point on my spine instead of attaching to the ribs. The big neurological issue that affects my legs is spina bifida. So I don't have full communication with my legs from like the knees down, and I don't have all the muscle mass that everyone else would have. So my right leg is mainly affected with that. So I like try and like put my leg in certain spots, but it doesn't go.
I'm kind of curious if it's worth you like describing your climbing style for anybody, because I think most listeners and many people have probably never heard of spina bifida. And so what does that actually mean for you? You know, because you have a very distinctive climbing style, and that's partially because you have giant arms, very strong upper body, and very small legs. And so it like lends itself to a very particular style of climbing, which is incredible on the board and incredible on like overhanging competition walls. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So I'm Dorito shaped.
Dude.
So I have pretty broad shoulders. I'm about 5'1". I don't know for our European listeners what the conversion for that is, but less than 2 meters.
Yeah, well below. Yeah.
Way below 2 meters short.
Yeah. Which is probably why your ape index is so absurd, right?
Yeah.
Because your arms are basically the size of a...
It's plus 10, so it's right around 6 foot.
Yeah, exactly. So you basically could have been a 6 foot tall man with normal size arms, but instead you're a 5'11" or 5'1" man with gigundous arms.
Yeah. My arms go all the way down to my knees. So I have a pretty good upper body build, pretty lean and cut overall. We start getting to my legs. My quads are pretty thick. It's actually interesting trying to buy pants half the time, because below my knees, my shins will just slide through the pants, but sometimes my quads actually expand my pants a little bit just because those are the only working muscles in my legs for the most part. And then below my knees, I don't feel much and I don't get a lot of movement. I get 0 movement out of my ankle and foot on my right side. I get a little bit on my left side. And so it really depends on which way the climb is going, on how confidently and how smoothly I do the movement, just due to the fact of like I can really only push off of my left foot. I don't really heel hook or toe hook that well. Now, thanks to Alex Johnson, heel hook.
Yeah.
My left hamstring is always tight due to a surgery I had where I was like in a body cast and my leg was propped up. So my left hamstring has been tight since 2006, which gives limited range of motion in my left leg, which is, of course, my power leg. So there's only a certain limited ways of me bringing my feet up in an efficient way. And then my whole entire spine is fused from like T5 all the way down into my coccyx. So like I only bend at the hips. I don't have any like spine bending, which makes it really helpful for front levers when your spine doesn't bend.
What a great training technique right there. Just fuse your spine, and then you have a rock solid core all the time.
Yeah. But because of that, my core has been really strong just because I've had to like balance how I walk. So I do have a leg length difference. My right leg is 2 inches shorter than my left. And so I walk with a little bit of a what I like to call a natural swagger. That has actually helped my core development overall because I've had to keep a tight core when I walk all the time. And it kind of keeps me balanced. So what I ideally like to climb is steep overhanging terrain Or ideally for sport routes, I like doing terrain that's like 25 to 45 degrees overhanging and just makes a better ability to be able to use the leg I actually can use. For boulders, like if you give me a cave, I'm probably going to campus the whole cave fluidly and be able to kind of move through that movement similarly to an ape. My dad likes to call me the missing link, so it's very fitting when you watch me climb on cave or overhanging terrain because once I get momentum going, I just kind of flow with the momentum and just keep it flowing the whole entire time.
Tell me about the paraclimbing World Cup circuit more broadly. So how many competitions are there? How many stops are there? Because I think most listeners are sort of aware of the World Cup circuit in general, and now the Olympics and nationals and, world championships, all that stuff. What is the paraclimbing circuit?
The paraclimbing circuit is our circuit for the people with physical disabilities and trying to make sure that we're keeping up with the IOPC and the level of competition worldwide. Typically, we get about 3 paraclimbing World Cups a year, but they're only on ropes. So we don't even have a Boulder World Cup. We only have paraclimbing World Cups, which is on a 2-rope top rope system currently. We'll find out at the end of the month whether or not some people are actually going to be leading. There's 4 or 5 categories up for lead transition.
Would yours?
Yes, mine would be up for part of that lead transition, which is fine.
Would you be excited about that?
I'm okay with it. It just slows down my pacing on the wall. That's all it does.
Yeah, because part of your natural style is so fast and so aggressive that it does lend itself to top roping when you just punch it as fast as you can.
I basically treat every World Cup climb as if it's a 50-foot boulder.
Yeah, totally.
So it'll be good. It'll help my movement overall if we do get pushed towards lead. But that's one of the things with paraclimbing is like a lot of people, we don't lead because, well, 3 points of contact and trying to lead on a wall and the IFSC doesn't want to take that risk. And some people will want to lead and some people won't want to lead. So we're trying to find a good balance with it. But we typically get 3 World Cups a year. And during World Championships years, we get another World Championship. This year, we had 3 main stops. We usually have a US-based World Cup. For the last 3 years, it's been in Salt Lake. Then we have a Austrian World Cup in Innsbruck, since it's the only place where all the World Cups meet together. So like we have speed, boulder, combined, and para. So like everyone's all in the same space at the same time. And that works out pretty well. That's one of my favorite World Cups every year is Innsbruck. They just put on a really good show.
Is that awesome to see everybody together like that at the same time?
No, it's super, super cool. And for a lot of the paraclimbers, like running into the professionals that are on the normal circuit, it's kind of like, oh, everyone's kind of training together, everyone's getting beta together and having conversations.
You see Yanya walk in and you're like, I can do that. I'm going to bring that kind of intensity to my climb.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Yanya not in Innsbruck. I've seen her in Ljubljana. I train in Ljubljana on occasions. She always has that intensity. She's super nice, but she always has like a certain level of intensity to her, which is very intimidating, but overall pretty nice person.
I think that's true for everybody that meets her. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot.
She's about business.
Yeah, totally. Well, sorry. So you were explaining the paraclimbing World Cup series. Is there the possibility of it being in the Olympics in LA in 2028?
Yeah. So we officially got signed on by the IOPC this year for the 2028 Paralympics in LA. So
it's officially in. That's locked in?
Yeah.
Oh wow. So paraclimbing is for sure in the Olympics in LA.
Yes.
Oh, is that awesome? Are you so psyched?
It's awesome. A little daunting because
now you have to train for 4 years.
Now I have to train for 4 years, and we still don't know which categories are going to go in.
Uh,
So in order for us to go into the Paralympics, they're giving us a certain medal count, and with the amount of categories that we actually have, we have to slim down a couple of categories to make sure we're meeting that medal count.
can you talk about how you personally got into competing in climbing?
Yeah,
You talked a little bit about finding climbing, but how did you get into full-on paraclimbing competitions?
that was accidental, completely accidental. I always had a competitive drive, but when I started climbing, I was like more interested in just wandering the hills of Pennsylvania and Maryland trying to find boulders. And that's all I really wanted to do was boulder. When I got into climbing, I was finishing up my senior year and I moved back home to Maryland. And there were a bunch of Earth Treks gyms in the area. So I started going to the Earth Treks gyms, started integrating into that community. And a friend of mine came up to me and he's like, "Hey, there's this paraclimbing festival happening down in Horsepens 40, and it's being put on by a bunch of these national paraclimbers." And he's like, "I think you should go just to get introduced to the community." So I loaded up my van at the time and drove the 12, 14 hours down to HP 40 from Maryland by myself.
That is so mega.
Not knowing anyone, I registered for this festival and they had a little bit of a bouldering competition. And I was like, it's an outdoor bouldering competition. I'll go and try it out. And I got integrated with the paraclimbing community. I had no idea that the community was so large and like had people all around the world. I found out that there was a paraclimber in my local gym system that I had never met before that was putting on an adaptive bouldering comp shortly after that festival. That's when I first met Maureen Beck and Ronnie Dixon. They kind of helped put on the festival. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of finding a community. After I did that festival, I went and did my first comp in Rockville, Maryland, which was just an adaptive bouldering comp. I actually hosted somebody that I met at the festival. He flew in from San Diego and he stayed at my house and we went and did the comp together.
What did it feel like to suddenly meet so many other paraclimbers and sort of discover that there was this whole world of competition and sort of community that you didn't know about before?
I didn't really know how it was going to affect me at that time. I just felt like it was awesome to find other people that were so into climbing, but also had different physical disabilities. And learning how they go through beta was actually like super helpful in my own climbing because I was able to take some of their skills and apply it to how I needed to learn how to climb. And when I did this comp, I was only like maybe a year and a half into climbing and was doing maybe V5s at the time. And I just got really stoked to kind of actually have a community and bounce ideas off of people because I was doing that in the gym for a long time, but people are like, "Oh, you should get your foot up." And I'm like, well, my foot doesn't exactly.
Yeah, my foot's not going up. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, well, just campus it out." And that was like the best beta I got from people in the gym was campus it out.
And that's why you're so good at campusing now?
Yeah, that's why I'm so good at campusing now. Finding that community, because that was something that I was like missing, was like in wheelchair basketball, like we had a team and our teammates were some of my best friends in college. And like with climbing, I was kind of like bopping around with one really good friend of mine, and that was it. I was getting integrated into the community, but it wasn't like I was getting like that true camaraderie that I was looking for that I had on the wheelchair basketball team in college. When you have a disability, everybody kind of experiences some sort of trauma. Everybody kind of trauma bonds together. And it's like, oh, you're one of us type of deal. And you just become part of a family that you didn't really expect to have, which is a really, really amazing experience in general. And it's really given me some of my best friends in the world. I mean, I'm in North Carolina staying at another paraclimber's house just because it's become like my whole entire like second family. And it gave me things that I never thought I would have based off of that. So finding that community was super important. And if Ronnie Dixon and his business partner Andrew Chow didn't put on the first Adaptive Climbers Festival, I honestly don't know where I would be in terms of like my climbing or where I would be in terms of lifestyle. When I got into climbing, I was on a very dark path, which I think a lot of climbers, when they find climbing, they're on a pretty dark path in some way or some form. And it's like that outlet to where they can express themselves through movement and be exposed to different lifestyle changes. And if I didn't find that community, I don't think I would have changed a good majority of my lifestyle around it. It kind of gave me new goals.
We'll be back with more after the break. I've been a North Face athlete for almost 18 years, which has been incredible, and I've always appreciated their commitment to exploration. Summit Series is the name of the pinnacle North Face products that I use on every expedition, and I love that their tagline is athlete tested and expedition proven. I've personally tested these products all over the world, and they've always proven themselves. Future Fleece is the next generation base layer that I wear almost every day of climbing outside, whether on the wall or at the crag. You can shop the full Summit Series collection at thenorthface.com. Like a lot of people, I shave regularly, and I care about high-quality, durable products. That's where Henson Shaving comes in. Their razors are built on groundbreaking research on the impact that shaving has on your skin. Disposable razors are not only bad for the environment, they can also cause a lot more skin irritation. Henson razors are built to provide a skin-friendly shave. They're machined to have less bend and flex so that the blade doesn't move while you're shaving, which gives you more control. Plus, there are no gimmicks like moisturizing strips or subscriptions. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/climbinggold to select the razor for you and use code climbinggold to get 2 years worth of free blades with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/climbinggold and use the code climbinggold. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix formulated with a science-backed ratio of sodium to potassium to magnesium. Each packet delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. It tastes great, and I've used it extensively on expeditions. And my 2-year-old loves it and calls it sprinkle water. Element is formulated for anyone looking to restore health through hydration and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those who follow keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinkelement.com/climbinggold. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. Talk about that path that you were on. Like, what were you going through when you found climbing?
I was very lost. Didn't know who I was. Didn't know what I was trying to work towards. All I knew was I wanted to be good at climbing, and I wanted to see how far I could take it. But I was pretty heavy into a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. Like, I was drinking a lot and smoking a lot right after college. Just in that lost phase, I think we all kind of get into a lost phase and we cling on to a couple of things that make us feel good for a few moments. And mine was weed, alcohol, and climbing.
Climbing being the healthiest of the three.
Yeah, well, it's relatively healthy.
Yeah, well, at least you've channeled it into something seemingly much more, much better for you.
Yeah. And when I got into the community and started competing, I did pretty well. My first bouldering competition in HB40, I won. My second bouldering competition, I came in second. I went to Adaptive Nationals that year and got second and ended up being the top pick for the US in our RP2 category. And so I was really stoked on that.
Do you feel like that really influenced your trajectory in climbing? Because I feel like, and we've interviewed a lot of people on Climbing Gold, and I feel like a big part of people's paths a lot of the time is that they discover that they're good at something, and they're sort of like, well, if I'm good at this, I should do this more. It's like,
yeah,
I mean, and I feel like I experienced that to some extent with soloing, where I'm sort of like, oh, I like doing this, and it turns out I'm kind of okay at it, and I'll just like go down this path and see where it takes me. Was that part of it? You were like, oh, I'm good at this thing. I'm going to do it.
It was a phrase my uncle and my dad would say. They were like, if you're good at something, don't do it for free. Um, which at that time, like, I was still climbing.
Yeah, I was like, don't you still do it for free, basically? Like,
Yeah, I was still doing it for free, but
so your dad is deeply disappointed in your climbing journey.
well, when I started getting sponsored, he's come around. When I started showing him some of the paychecks that I was getting, he's like, all right, it's a job now.
That's funny.
He would make fun of me quite a lot. He was like, you got to go get a real job. And I was like, but I really like this, and I think I'm on to something.
And you're certainly working very hard at it.
Working extremely hard at it. Once I figured that out, he kind of stopped harping on me. Yeah, I kind of found that I was good at it. I really liked it. And then I got kind of smacked in the face in 2018. Like, my fourth competition ever was a world championship. And that's the trajectory for a lot of paraclimbers. We only have a limited amount of like para-specific comps. Like, we don't have a full, like, huge paraclimbing circuit in the US yet.
Yeah, and there aren't all the tons of regional, like local small scale comps and all that. Because I mean, for most other competitors, they start doing all kinds of like,
Yeah.
The Halloween bash or like random comps where they're just like doing local comps. Like hardly anybody goes to nationals without having done a bunch of other competitions ahead of time.
Yeah.
But I feel like on the para circuit, it's just that there are way fewer options for that kind of thing.
Back then, it was like you did a nationals, you did well, and you got a spot on the team if you got in like the top 3 or top 6, and you got the opportunity to go do a world championship. And I went from like making podium very often to getting 10th.
But I mean, is that so bad at an international competition for your first time?
It was out of 12.
Oh, out of 12. Okay, well that stings a little more because
That stings a little bit.
I went to Youth Worlds when I was young, and it was my first time doing an international competition. I got like 45th or something, and I was just like, oh my god, the level of competition in the rest of the world is just so much higher than it was in Northern California where I was from. And so I was just kind of like, well, I just got totally spanked, and you're just kind of like, okay, that's,
yeah.
But so what did you take from your 10th place finish? I mean, was that motivating or discouraging, or, how do you feel?
I was very discouraged, but like the way I was raised, it's like you're going to get smacked down a couple of times and then you're going to figure out how to rise again. So I was on top of a castle in Salzburg.
As one does.
Yeah, drinking a beer and eating pretzels at like 10 in the morning. And I was like, you know what? I think this is the last one for a little while. And I went completely sober for 5 years just to figure out how to become better at climbing, and just taking like something that wasn't bringing any benefit to my life out of the equation to see if I can put more energy and more focus into this climbing thing. I took drugs and alcohol completely out of my diet for a solid 5 years.
And then reintroduce them sparingly?
Sparingly, yeah. I have a healthy relationship with all that. Back then, I did not. And addiction runs in my family pretty heavily. So I was like, okay, if I can remove it and make something good, maybe I can revisit this later. So I started doing that. I started building paraclimbing communities in the Mid-Atlantic, going to local gyms and saying, hey, we should put a paraclimbing category into some of your citizens comps. And I started doing that around the Mid-Atlantic. And it was really well received. So I started helping put it on comps for paraclimbers and having people come down from like New York or come up from the South to do these competitions. Partially a little selfish because I just wanted more opportunities to figure out what I needed to do in higher level competitions. But I also saw the community aspect of like, we don't get that many comps. And if we're doing like one comp before nationals, if we're lucky to kind of find that competition mindset, that's not really preparing us for good results for the world championships.
Yeah, it's just not enough practice. You were talking about your family's work ethic and just kind of the, hard work and grinding. And I kind of want to talk about training for climbing, because I feel like it's maybe an underappreciated aspect of paraclimbing.
Yeah.
But basically, I think the idea that I want to get at is that you train just as hard as anybody else trains, and it's just as hard to work. It's like all the same apparatuses, same tools, and like basically it's really freaking hard work to be good at climbing, no matter who you are and where you're coming from. I don't know. Talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I come from a training background in general, and I come from a hard work ethic community. Like my whole family, they're hard workers, contractors, truck drivers, you name it. If you're going to do something, you better be good at it. And that's always been a value my parents have instilled in me is like, if you're going to do something, you need to be good at it. When I got into wheelchair basketball, I was like, okay, I need to like figure out how to be the best wheelchair basketball player I can be. And that way I'm bringing something to the table. And so I had already kind of had that discipline and training mindset down. And when I got into climbing, I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to transfer this training aspect and that cross training aspect into climbing and figure out a way to make sure that I'm prepared for what I want to do.
And so what'd that look like?
Buying a lot of books and getting help from a lot of friends. Luckily, the gym community that I was in produced numerous professional climbers. And so I went to them and asked them how they got stronger and what training aspects they went into. So a lot of my training aspects that I kind of went off of came from like climbers like Matt Bosley, Fernando Jimenez, and a few other like strong boulders that came out of the Mid-Atlantic in the mid 2000s. I bought Eric Horse books. I bought a bunch of other manuals on how to actually get better at climbing.
All the same things that I've bought over the years, where you're sort of like, oh, I read every book, and you just hope for one nugget in it. It's like, if I can get one useful training tool from this, then it's worth it.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I went about it. I started doing like weighted repeaters on the hangboard, learning how energy systems worked. It got to the point where I was so obsessive about training that I got like a personal trainer to help me with my cross training and my weightlifting. And so that was more along the lines of like making sure my legs were stronger and that my antagonist muscles from climbing muscles were stronger. So I did a lot of chest work, a lot of tricep work, and a lot of leg work with personal trainers. And then I ran off of linked boulder circuits, 4x4s, and all that stuff just to get ready for paraclimbing comps. I became a board king for a little while where all I did was climb on kilter board or moon board just to learn some other movement. And I relied a lot on like friends in my local gym community of like learning how to trigger certain energy systems and learning how to build out structured training plans. Like it was to that point where I was so focused in on training that I wanted to become a trainer and a coach. So I went and got education and invested my own time and money into learning the more academic parts of training. That way I could efficiently coach myself and coach others.
And so, are you coaching now?
I'm still coaching now. I have a private coaching business that I use to kind of coach others, but I'm also getting coached myself. The last year, I was like sitting around and I was like, I'm on the brink of something. I need help getting past this point. So I actually hired Alex Johnson to be my coach, and she's been building out training programs. Like we're taking it 9 weeks at a time until 2028.
Wow.
I've seen a huge shot up in my movement and my training skill. I used an outdoor boulder to kind of benchmark where I was, and I actually sent it yesterday.
Nice.
And it's like a North Carolina test piece.
What describe it? What's the boulder? What's the what's it called?
It's a boulder called Tsunami. It's a V8 out in Mooreswall, and it is the sharpest thing I've ever been on. It's just this quartzite boulder that has these insane crimp rails and a huge dyno finish. And the last time I was here, I was nowhere close to hitting the dyno finish. Yesterday, like I pulled on and the crimp line was 3 times easier than it used to be, and I was using skip beta that I've never tried before just because it flowed better. And I was like, what is going on? And my movement just flowed really well. I was like, I thought this was going to be like a harder fight. Like, I thought I was going to be power screaming my whole way through it. It just came together.
Is there any feeling better than training and then coming back, basically seeing your training work?
Yeah.
And like, oh, I am noticeably better, stronger, like this is easier.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, there's seriously nothing better in climbing.
It's my most proud boulder now. Like, I've been to that boulder 3 times and I've tried it on 3 different sessions. But over like a 4-year period, you kind of get in your head of like, am I actually improving? At least for me, my World Cup results are pretty consistent. I'm consistently silver at World Cups. I can't really figure out how to get gold. I've only gotten gold a couple times, and it was in a really big breakout season for me. I came back from Europe this past time and I'm like, am I actually getting stronger? I really can't tell. And I came and did this boulder and I was like, oh no, I'm significantly stronger. It's just my competition's also getting significantly stronger.
Yeah, well, that raises an interesting point because we talked to Mo Beck last year, and she made a point of how much standards have risen over the last 5 years or so in the paraclimbing circuit. She was just saying that it feels like things have really been taking off in paraclimbing. And is that something that you're experiencing? I mean, you, in some ways, you represent that rise in competition standards, but you're also right in the midst of it where all your competitors are also getting much better.
Ever since I've been in the competition circuit, we've been trying to push towards the Paralympics. And we kept getting feedback that our standards aren't high enough and everything, or we're not a big enough show yet. And I think that kind of drove a fire underneath some people's asses, and people just started blowing up and seeing how well other people were doing. And like, I look at people not in my category and I'm like, I want to be as good as them, or if not better than them. So it's like finding that person you want to chase and going for it, even if you're not competing against them, like seeing what they're doing and raising your own personal standard to make sure you're hitting an overall big standard has been like my biggest push in paraclimbing.
We'll be back with more after the break. When you start climbing, you typically make progress every time you go to the gym. You get stronger, your technique improves, you get better shoes, and you quickly jump another grade or 2. You're a solid climber now. But then eventually that progress starts to slow down. And somewhere over the last months or years, you stopped making progress. The good news is you don't have to stay stuck. With the right approach, you can jump several grades again, just like you did when you first started climbing. And you can continue to improve your technique and begin to look truly elegant on the wall. There's nobody better to help you on that journey than Dave McLeod. Dave has been a pro climber for over 20 years and is widely regarded as one of the best climbing coaches. Dave has partnered with Altitude, Magnus Bitmo's climbing platform, to produce the most comprehensive climbing technique training that will allow you to break through the intermediate plateau and unlock harder grades. To learn the 3 key elements needed to make progress again, and to sign up for the course, head to altitudeclimbing.com/climbinggold. I first found Coros when I was looking for a GPS watch that could track my biggest outdoor adventures. I needed something with a massive battery life that was also robust enough to handle the climbing. As it turns out, Coros is the only GPS watch brand that has done some serious development for climbers, from multi-pitch GPS tracking to indoor programmed workouts. The watches have a mind-blowing battery life. The Vertex watch series lasts for more than 100 hours in GPS activities, so I only need to charge it once every several weeks. I only need to charge my watch so sporadically that I can never find the charger because I haven't used it in 6 weeks. If you're interested in bringing new technology into your climbing training and tracking, you should consider their new Vertex 2S. Go to Coros.com and use the code ClimbingGold to secure a free watch carabiner with the purchase of your new Vertex 2S. The link's in the show notes. Who are you looking to for inspiration?
A really good friend of mine in the RP3 category from the Netherlands, Jamie Barendek's one of them. Ronnie Dixon has always been one of my main inspirations inside the paraclimbing community. He was the first above the knee amputee to do V10, and I've always wanted to be at that level of like being one of the first paraclimbers to be doing these harder outside climbs. Like, I have goals of V12 and 514. So like I always look at the people that are like at the brink of 514, V12, V10.
You've climbed V12 on the board though, haven't you?
I've climbed V12, V11, and V10 on the board. I keep picking the wrong boulders. That's my problem. I'm like, oh, this looks burly, and then there's always like a crux shutdown move that I'm not expecting.
Yeah, it's tough because you just have to find something that doesn't have like a key heel hook or like some
Yeah,
crank or, some crazy move.
some cranking under cling or something like that.
What are your big goals in climbing? I mean, you said you want to climb V12, you want to climb 514. Those are like pretty natural. Like that makes total sense. Those are like sort of elemental, like basic climbing goals. We're like, oh, like, we all sort of share those. I mean, do you aspire to the LA 28 Olympics if it comes together?
Yeah, if it comes together, I aspire to the LA 2028 Olympics, Paralympics. But my overall goal in climbing is to be the best all-around paraclimber in the world. So I want to be the best at trying to lead trad, doing ice, boulders, sport. I want to be known as that like go-to jack of all trades
Hmm.
inside of a place where you have to specialize in so many different things, that I want to be a good asset in the paraclimbing community. I have goals of doing MI8 at some point. I got into ice climbing and mixed climbing this winter, and I kind of really took to it for a minute. Got the opportunity to learn a little bit from like Matt Cornell and Andres Marin ice climbing in Bozeman this year, and it was super beneficial. And I was like, okay, this is something that I can see myself doing when my competition life is toning down, is like upping the trad aspects, toning down the boulder aspects, because eventually like my body won't be able to take the bouldering falls that I want to take. I used to say my years are limited, but as I'm like getting stronger, I'm like, okay, I think I could probably boulder until I'm about 40. But my overall goal is to make it a lifelong pursuit, in whether it's ice, mixed, boulder, sport, trad. I want to make it a lifelong pursuit that if there's something in front of me, I can figure out a way to get up.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting to hear that you're really motivated to be a well-rounded, all-around climber like that. Because in some ways, it seems more obvious to just play to your strengths and avoid some of your weaknesses. I don't know. It's interesting to hear you say that, because like I've always, personally, I've always been pretty into being a well-rounded climber, or trying to be. But maybe that's because I don't have any particular strengths or weaknesses in the same way. It's just hard to know how climbers choose their goals like that. Like why are you interested in the whole picture like that versus just being as strong as you can possibly be, like pulling hard on the board or whatever?
I look back at like movies that I watched as I first started getting into climbing. Like I watched a lot of your films when I was getting into climbing. I watched a lot of Cedar's films getting into climbing. You guys' Africa film really kind of shaped that aspect of like, well, competition climbing and bouldering is a thing, but like doing like
But climbing big walls in Kenya, yeah, yeah, exactly. But you're like, that is rad.
climbing big walls in Kenya also looks cool.
Totally.
I think I grew up with a very big growth process mindset. So, like, looking at just yourself as a human, what are you doing daily to try and grow as a human, has been a big influence in why I want to be an all arounder. Because, like, if you're just sticking to your strengths and then someone's like, oh, you're a strong climber, you want to go do a multi pitch, but you don't know how to wrap, you don't know how to follow trad, you don't know how to lead trad, like, are you becoming a liability, or are you just stagnating in your growth and only having that one trick pony type of deal? I don't want to be a one trick pony. I want to make sure that I'm as all around as possible. Now I'm going to stick to my strengths when it comes to like the bigger goals inside of those like grade ranges, just because like that's what I'm good at. But the ultimate goal is to be able to, towards the end of my career, it's like, oh, if I can lead a 512 trad, climb some 513 sport, and boulder,
Double digits.
I'm just going to have a better time with the community and have a better opportunity to be more involved in the community and be that leader of like, hey, we may have disabilities, but we also have the ability to learn how to be good leaders and good community members. When you're inside a disability culture, like if you want to be treated equal, you need to know as much, if not more, than everyone else. That way, you yourself are an asset and you're not considered a liability. Like, that's been a big thing in my whole entire life is like, I better know just as much as everybody else, but also be able to excel at everything. That way, I'm not putting someone else at risk or
Totally.
being taken seriously by people that are like, you have a disability, you're a climbing coach. And I'm like, yeah, but I've done these things. I've definitely had some hesitant pushback from people while teaching like basic belay classes. They're like, do you know what you're doing? I'm like, I'm well aware of what I'm doing, type of deal.
Do you find that exhausting? Does that wear you down?
No, yeah, I mean, it does to a degree, but like for the most part, I've always had a chip on my shoulder of like trying to be the best at whatever I'm doing. So that just gives more fuel to the fire.
Is that just natural? I mean, because like, is that just innate personality, or do you think that's a result of your upbringing and like the challenges that you faced?
I'm a pretty lazy person if I don't have a point to prove.
Yeah.
But if I have a point to prove and have to prove myself, then it gives a lot of fuel to my fire and gives a lot of stoke to try and like do the most epic thing possible. I think it's definitely a lot of challenges because a lot of doctors said I wouldn't be able to walk or wouldn't be able to talk or do certain aspects of life. And I've proved every single one of them wrong. And that's kind of my main goal in life is to just kind of prove people wrong and just keep that chip on my shoulder, but also be humble at the same time. It's a very hard dichotomy.
Yeah, you're walking a tightrope. It's a hard thing to like maintain that kind of motivation and like still stay fired up, but then also try to be chill. And I mean, yeah, it's navigating a lot of different challenges.
A lot of different like social aspects that
Totally.
are just they're good in a way, but they're also like toxic in a way. So trying to find that balance. I've never really been a super balanced person. It not until like recently have I kind of found like a real good balance with everything. And I think being a well-rounded person makes you a better person in general. So being a well-rounded climber, you get different aspects and you're able to be humbled.
Yeah, you get humbled all the time. Totally. Yeah, every time the wind picks up and you're halfway up a wall and you're like, man, I should have brought a layer. You're like, uh-oh. Like that's, yeah.
It kind of balances itself out. Like climbing does kind of find that balance for me. So if I'm trying to be the best all-arounder, the pride I take in like competition climbing, it'll get smacked down when I'm like trying to learn new multi-pitch skills or new trad skills. And it kind of keeps me a well-rounded person in that aspect. And it's a way to respect every discipline of the sport. And I think that's like the biggest thing when I come into climbing is I want to respect every discipline of the sport.
Fitz, is there anything you think we're missing?
Did you ever really imagine that, this sort of ability to chase climbing in all the disciplines, really starting to be on a global level, the Olympics, like, can you sort of believe that this is all happening? I mean, you guys, you're an athlete, a professional athlete, like all of it. Like, how insane does this feel to you?
I get a little emotional about it, actually. I always had the goal to be a professional athlete in some capacity, but having to switch sports and kind of figure out a new realm for me, it's truly been a dream come true. Like when I got into climbing, I'm like, okay, if I can go professional, like that's that's the goal right now. And I've had like minor sponsorships before the North Face and Evolve, and it's just kind of accumulated and built up over the years just with how hard I climb and how much I actually work at it. That discipline of like trying to figure out how to work at climbing has been my main key. And that's like discipline, whether it's like the training aspect or even the social and political aspect. Like I'm not the best at social and political endeavors, but somehow I've taken the advice of like Meg Coyne and a bunch of other climbing managers that kind of helped me develop into the human I am today. And if I didn't work on not just myself, but also my climbing, I don't think I would have been at this point at all. And I'm deeply grateful for people like Andrew Chow and Ronnie Dixon and Maureen Beck for actually mentoring me through what I wanted to do. And if I didn't find paraclimbing, I would have never met my fiance. I would have never had these career opportunities. I would have never been at this point. So every time I look back at it, I'm just grateful for the people that helped me get here and continue to help me improve and see a kind of a career aspect, because it's not an easy thing to do on your own. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned is like you do need a support team and you do need people that know the business and know the game to help you develop in the way you want to develop. And you have to have people that care. I've had so many other people in our paraclimbing community like recommend books to me so that I could become a better all-around person. A lot of people don't understand like how hard some of these like professional climbers that are on the circuit or are these big names like truly work on not just their climbing but themselves too. And I get to see it in Salt Lake all the time. I get to see climbers that had interesting personalities become well-rounded people.
Should have met me 15 years ago. You'd be like, oh man, that guy's got some issues.
Yeah, and it's finding that love for that growth process has been super beneficial, because like what we do as humans is grow. And if you're not growing, then you're stagnant and you're not producing something else into the world. And my biggest aspect is like, how do I become a better person to make sure I'm leaving a big impact in the world and changing the people's lives around me? And I think that's been like my biggest push inside of professional climbing is like, I got to work on myself. That way I can better help other people trying to get around it. And I've definitely found that realm, and it's truly a dream. I never thought I'd be here and seeing and meeting the people I've met and seeing the same processes. Like every person I've met has had some sort of growth experience that has changed them. And I'm like, okay, this is actually the trajectory of like how people are doing it. And I was on the right track. I just needed some help from some good friends and close people. Finding climbing was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So I'm truly thankful.
Thanks, Ben, for sharing your story with us. You can follow him and check out just how insanely strong he is over on Instagram at crushing_Benjamin. Also, if you look in the show notes, we've left links to 2 Climbing Gold episodes that feature climbers mentioned in today's show, Mo Beck and Alex Johnson. Check them out. Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape Then Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production team includes the talents of Marco Seiler Gonzalez and Evan Phillips. Skylar Perwins is our YouTube and social media editor. Music today by Brendan O'Connell. Tracks are courtesy of the artist. Our creative director is me, Fitz Gahal. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RXR Sports and Lisi Hendricks and Becca Call for Duct Tape Then Beer. Thanks for another incredible year. We are already scheming for 2025. Talk to you soon.